Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. New location. Welcome to my crafting sewing room, because today I am going to attempt to do my first tutorial. I had a few requests to do this, so I have to apologize right up front. I am not an instructor. I have never taught a class at all. I've never done a tutorial, so please bear with me. I will try to be as clear and concise as possible, but I know myself and sometimes I can get a bit wordy, so I apologize for that. Just please be nice. Bear with me. So what we're gonna work on today is the 1 hour basket, and I just want to say up front, this is not my original design. I found this pattern on the internet on Craftsy, and it is by Hearts and Bees, and I printed it off months and months and months ago. So it took me a moment to remember where I had found it, but if you just Google Hearts and Bees 1 hour basket tutorial, it'll pop right up. Okay, I will show you what the original size is, and then I will show you how I made it my own. So the original size is going to be this size, which is a cute little basket, and it's the first one. It's the first size that I made. And I just put like my small projects in here and carry it around from room to room, because I stitch pretty much in every room of my house. Okay, except for the bathroom. I don't stitch in there. Okay, but this is the size that we're gonna make today. And as you can see, it's much larger than the original, and I divided the fabric, added some trim to make it my own. And even on this small one, I made a few changes. There are so many things you can do with this basic pattern. I added the lace and the buttons. You could add just about anything you want to suit your taste. So I'll cover what supplies we need first. You're going to need 2 to 3 different fabrics. If you want to make it exactly like I did, where you have the bottom fabric, the top fabric, and then a different lining fabric, you will need 3 different fabrics. So you need to decide, what color you want your handles. Okay, you could make them as I did, the same as the bottom fabric. You could make it the same as the top fabric, or you could use it the lining fabric. So whichever one of those you choose, you are going to need, you could get away with 1/3 of a yard if the fabric is cut straight, but unfortunately, even at fabric stores like Joann's, you get the piece of fabric home, you lay it out on the table, and it's never straight. So I always like to go with a little bit more. So I would probably go with whatever fabric you're using with the handles and the top or bottom. I would go with 1/2 a yard. The other one, you can go with 1/4 yard. So for the one that I'm going to show you today, my top is going to be with this fabric. My bottom and my handles are going to be out of the check. And then my lining will be with just the basic black. So for me, I need 1/4 yard of the yellow and the stars. I'm going to need 1/2 a yard of the check and a half a yard of the lining. You're also going to need fusible fleece, and you can pick this up at Joann's. Walmart even carries it. I think at Joann's it runs about $8 something a yard, but you can use a coupon on it. At Walmart, I've seen it for $5 and something, but no coupon. And it's just like the, it's by Pellon. And I think this one I did buy at Walmart. And it is style 987F. I'll give you that. Okay, and you're going to need a half a yard of that. You're also going to need just basic sewing. Whoops, wait, before we do that. Trim. You're going to need some trim to cover the seam between the two fabrics. And you're going to need 1 1/4 yard of that. Okay, so the basic sewing supplies, obviously a sewing machine, scissors, pins, trusty seam ripper, because at some point in every project I always have to rip something out. If you have a cutting mat, that's great. Use your rotary cutter and your gridded ruler. If you don't have that, no worry. All the cuts are straight cuts, and so you could just use either a yardstick, which I think is most helpful, because if you're going to cut using scissors rather than a rotary cutter, you might want to draw your line so you have a straight edge, but you can also use just a regular measuring tape. What else? I think an ironing board, because we need to fuse the fleece and press our seams. So I think that's about it. I will need to reset my camera and get everything else ready, and we'll be good to go. Okay guys, before I reset the camera to show on my sewing area, a couple of things that I need to mention. If you're using a directional fabric, you want to make sure that it's going in the right direction, obviously. So I'll give you the cutting measurements for the pieces. Okay, now remember, this is going to be my top, and you want to cut 2 of these 8 by 20 inches, and the 20-inch side is the top of your bag. Literally, not only is it the top fabric, but the 20-inch side, the long side, is the top of your fabric. So if you have directional fabric, you want it to be going, the design to be up and down like this, not sideways, this way. You want it going up and down. So you cut 2 out of your top fabric, 8 by 20, and I always press my fabric before I cut it. I just feel like I get a better cut that way. Then you also want the exact same measurements, 2 for the bottom fabric, also 8 inches by 20 inches. So I have 2 here. And again, if it's directional or it's stripes and you want it to go, horizontally or vertically, keep that in mind before cutting. Then I'm choosing to do my handles out of the check. So you want 2 of those, and those measurements are 5 inches by 9 inches. You need 2 of the lining. The lining and the fleece are cut the same size. Can't get these apart. So I have 2 pieces for the lining, and those are cut at 15.5 and by 20. 15.5 by 20. And again, your fleece is cut the same. So it's 15.5 deep and 20 inches wide. Okay, and I will hold this up. If you want to write this down, the cutting measurements, I'll hold this up for a moment so you can get a look at that and write that down. I have a very squeaky chair and you're probably going to hear it a lot. I'm so sorry. It seems like no matter how much WD-40 I put on it, it doesn't make a difference. It's a very old wooden chair and it squeaks. Okay, so now I will go ahead and I will get my sewing machine set up and the camera hopefully at a good angle where you can see me sewing. Okay, so we want to take one of our top pieces and one of our bottom pieces and we want to put them right sides together, lining up the edges, and just pin as much as you need or as little as you need depending on your sewing experience. I usually, on a long piece like this, I usually don't pin. I just make sure that it is lined up as I sew. And you're pinning it along the 20-inch side. So you have right sides together. You want to do that for both. Again, making sure that you have it nice and lined up. All the way down. Okay, so it should look something like this. Let me see if I can pull this over. And we are going to stitch these seams with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And if you have a needle down position on your machine, I always recommend using that. It just, in the event that you have to stop at some point, your needle's always going to be down and you won't lose your place. Okay, so we're just going to stitch this up. And mine does an automatic locking in of the edges in the beginning. And I apologize, my machine is so overdue for a servicing. I've had this machine probably for 16 years, and I have loved it completely the entire time. It was the best purchase I ever made. I purchased it in Germany when we lived there, and it's sewn a lot of stuff over the years. But it's due for a checkup. And because it normally is a very quiet machine, and I can tell just by the sound that it desperately needs a good oiling, cleaning and oiling. Okay, and again, I'm locking the back of the seam there. Not even going to take that all the way. Oh, I'm so sorry. Not going to take that all the way off yet. We can just go ahead and start our next one. And I'm a quilter, so I'm used to doing 1/4 inch seams, so I had to mark my 1/2 inch here. Just so I wouldn't forget. I'm sure you can see that. Okay, again, we're stitching the seams together on the 20-inch side. And again, pay attention if you have anything directional, that you have it going the right way up, or in the right direction, I should say. lock our seams in at the end. Okay, so you have now one large piece. We're going to take those over to the ironing board and we're going to press those seams open. So meet you at the ironing board. Okay, hopefully you guys can see this well enough. I had started filming this this morning, and I had visitors, and which included my little grandson, and we ended up spending quite a bit of time together, and the day got away from me. So now it's starting to get dark, and the light in here is not quite as good, but hopefully you can see this okay. Okay, so the first thing I like to do in any sewing projects is to set the seam. And this is a very old iron. I don't have steam with it. Fun fact, I found this at a garage sale for $5, and it reminded me of the one that my mother had when I was a child. And who knows how old this thing is, but it works like a charm. Okay, so I just pressed over the seam lightly. Now I'm going to open it out and press the seams open. And for any of you who have never quilted or done a lot of sewing, pressing is different than ironing. When you're ironing clothes, you want to you know, like really get all those wrinkles out and press hard. But pressing for sewing, when you're sewing, you don't want to do that because you just want to lightly go over it because you will distort the fabric. So you just want to press lightly. I know I have a lot of subscribers who are quilters and sewers and are more advanced with sewing, but I have several as well that are new to sewing, so trying to cover all the bases here. Okay, so again, we just set that seam. We're going to open it up and press it open. Okay, while we are here at the ironing board, now I'll show you what we do with our handles. Now remember, this is 9 inches by 5 inches, and I do this a little bit differently than she has. Hearts and Bees does it. She does fold it in half like this, wrong sides together, and presses it. Okay, and then she only folds it in 1 inch. I'm going to fold it all the way to the one side, all the way to the center. I don't like my handles as wide as she makes hers, so I'm folding the other side all the way to the center again, pressing that. So you have something that looks like this. You have the center press and then the 2 side presses, okay? Then we're going to take it and we're going to fold it in half yet again, matching up the edges, and just give it another little press. Have 2 handles. Okay, I think while we are over here as well, let me just grab the fusible fleece. Okay, so if you've never worked with fusible fleece before, obviously when you were cutting it, you're going to notice there's like a really rough side. That's the side that has the glue on it. And the other side is rough, but not quite as rough. So you want the glue side up. and you're going to place these wrong sides together. So if we consider that the glue side is the wrong side of the fusible fleece, the side that has the seam allowance is the wrong side of the fabric. We're going to place those one on top of the other, wrong sides together, matching them up as best we can, making sure that your seam is still pressed open, and then we're going to fuse those together. And just read the directions on your fusible fleece as to how you do that. Some brands may call for steam, others do not, but just take your time and get it to fuse together. Okay, I think that side is fused nicely. And I'm just going to make sure and smooth out as much as possible and go ahead and fuse this side. And please be careful, irons get very hot. I own a very nice Rowenta iron, but I don't know, for the last 6 months or so, I have left that for ironing my clothing. It used to be my quilting iron, but this one is so nice and it's heavy, so it, I don't know, it just irons much nicer. It just doesn't have steam. Okay, so I'm just going back over it again. That's driving me crazy. And I like to put a cloth down on my ironing board so that if I happen to get any sticky residue from the fusible fleece, it's not on my ironing board cover, it's on the dishcloth. Okay, so I think you get the idea. You just make sure you fuse it well, and do the second one the exact same way, and I'll meet you back at the sewing machine. Okay, so here we are back at the sewing table, and hopefully you've gotten your pieces fused together. It's kind of a now or never thing, so if you need to take extra time to fuse the fusible webbing onto your bag, outer part of your bag, make sure that you take plenty of time for that and get that glue melted and so that the fabric sticks to the fleece. Now is when I like to put my trim on, if you're doing the trim. And I don't know if other people do it the way that I do it, but this is how I do it, so that I make sure that everything lines up on the sides of the bag nicely. I lay my two pieces together side by side, and I have them even here at the top and at the bottom, which unfortunately my table isn't big enough to hold everything. And I'm using rickrack for this, so I just make sure that I have a little bit hanging off of this edge. You see that? And again, I just make sure that I have it lined up nicely. And our goal obviously is to cover this seam. So I'm going to start at one end, pinning it. And sorry, I'm out of frame here, but there's nothing I can do about that. You'll see here in a second. Okay, here we are down here. So I'm pinning it where I want it. Let's see. And making sure that I have it as straight as possible. Okay, and instead of cutting it and then moving on to the next one, I just continue on. You can always cut it after you've pinned it, but in order to get them to match up when we stitch these two pieces together, I've found that this is the best way. Fingers crossed that it actually matches up. But if it doesn't, you know what? It's not the end of the world. But it does look nicer if they match on the end product. Okay, so I'm just going to continue to go ahead and pin down here. Oh, sorry for the squeaky chair. I actually brought another chair in. It was worse. So lesser of two evils here. Okay, let me see if I like the way this looks, if I think it looks pretty even before I cut it. Actually, you know what? I'm going to unpin that, and I'm going to move them exactly side by side, matching up the seams, matching up the top edges. And I'm just going to pretend like it's already together, and then I'm going to pin. I hope that, I'm sorry if my arms are in the way. I don't know how all these bloggers who do the sewing tutorials and everything have their camera set up. It's amazing. I tried to convince my son to be my cameraman, and he's like, are you kidding? No way. Okay, so once you have it pinned and you are happy with it, and I'm going to put one more in here in the end, just to be on the safe side. But if you are happy with it, then it's at that point that you can go ahead and cut this in the middle. Okay? And then we start stitching this together. Now you may have selected something that is, you know, a flat lace like I did here with the vintage lace, or something that just you would only stitch at the top. I stitched both sides of this. If it's one that you would only stitch at the top, I would recommend putting it exactly at the seam. Oh, that's not even in camera. I would recommend putting it exactly at the seam rather than in the middle of the seam, because if it lifts up, then you're going to be able to see the seam. But if you put it on the seam, then the seam is completely hidden. Okay, so let me move one of these out of the way, and I have already switched over. I'm stitching this with red thread, obviously, to match. So I've already switched my thread out. I need to fix this. Sorry, this is real-time videoing, guys. This is, there we go. Now it's in there flat. Okay, so I'm just going to you don't have to worry about sinking or securing your stitches at the end on this, because it's going to be in the seam allowance at the end. But that's total personal preference on that. You can go ahead and backstitch if you want or not. And I'm going to put my glasses on for this one. Okay, so here we go with this. And I'm trying to stitch it as straight as possible. That just comes with time and practice. When you can't line your edge up with anything, hopefully I will like the way this turns out. It won't look too crooked. I'm talking about the stitches, not the rickrack. Okay, so there we go on the first one. And that's how we look. Okay, so when you, what did I do with my scissors? You always want to clip your excess threads off the end. I think I forgot to mention that earlier. But you can go ahead and do the second one, and I'll be right back. Okay, so we have the trims stitched on both sides, and the next step is to put the two pieces together, right sides together, and you want to fold this back and try to match your trim evenly to one another and the edges of the bag together, because we're going to sew the side seams. So I'm just going to stick a couple of pins in here. And we're using a 1/2 inch seam allowance on the sides as well. Okay, so I will show you, well, I will stitch this. A little bit closer over, maybe you can, it's just a straight seam. This one you do want to lock your stitches down. Okay, so and as you approach your trim, you might just want to lift it up and make sure that it's still matching. Fingers crossed. And continue stitching to the end. And back stitching there till it locks the stitches in. Okay, so the moment of truth. Yay! It pretty much matches. Because it's rickrack, it's not going to be exact because of we cut actually a section of it out, which is now in the seam. So that's close enough for me. All right, so you want to do the exact same thing on the other side. And I will do that, and I'll be right back. Okay, so we're back at the sewing machine. We're just looking at our side seams. We're happy with the way our lace or our rickrack or whatever, our trim lines up. If you're happy with it, we can go on to the next step. If you're not, you know, unfortunately sometimes we have to take things out and redo it until we're satisfied with it. But I'm pretty happy with the way mine turned out. So we're going to go back, turn it right, wrong side out, because we are going to stitch the bottom seam. Okay, now I know that we just pressed these seams open, but for right now we're going to close them back up, and make sure that you are stitching the bottom. My bottom is the checked. Trust me, I have done crazy things like accidentally stitched the wrong end together and had to get my seam ripper out. So we're just going to stitch all the way across on the 20-inch side of the bottom. And again, we are using a 1/2 inch seam. Okay, so, and for this step, you do not need to lock your seam in or your stitches in. and you will understand why. And you can pin this if you want, but a lot of the times the fabric will just hold itself together, so I don't bother to pin. I just check occasionally to make sure it's still lined up, and we're good to go. This poor machine. I called to see if I could get it in for servicing this week and maybe delay this tutorial by a few days, and they are booked up until next week anyway, so I just thought I would wait. Okay, a few threads there. We want to probably clip those off. Let me reach and grab a different pair of scissors, and these are paper cutting scissors, so that doesn't work too well. Okay, so we're going to leave that for the moment. You've got your bottom seam, okay, and leave it as it is. And we're going to work a little bit on the handles. Now, we want to leave them folded together. And I am just going to do probably, well, I'm going to stitch them together using like 1/8 of an inch seam. But if you want to do a 1/4 inch seam on them, that's fine. It's totally up to you. I'm going to stick one pin in here in the middle just to keep them held together the way I want. And I'm going to stitch down one side and then down the other, but I will show you an old quilting trick. And these, you don't have to set the stitches. You don't have to back stitch on these either, but I do like my needle down. So I'm doing basically it's a top stitch on it. And when you're stitching more than one thing of the same thing, don't lift your presser foot and raise your needle. You can just, well, you have to lift your presser foot a little bit, but don't raise your needle or, you know, move the other fabric. Just continue sewing. It's called chain stitching. And when you're doing in quilting, when you're stitching several of the same types of pieces together, that little bit of time makes a huge difference. You just stitch one right after the other. Okay, so we've reached the end of that one. We're going to turn it around. I'm going to pull it out a little bit, and I'm going to stitch the other side. And turn that over and continue stitching on this piece, on the second piece, down the other side of the second piece. Okay. Hang on, I have to get my scissors. Okay. So you want to trim all the end threads off. You can easily clip these apart, trim the threads off of this piece, and you're going to have something that looks like this. You have two somethings that look like this. Those are your handles. Okay, let me just move this aside for a moment. The next step, you want to clean off all the stray threads that seam together. And I wore totally the wrong outfit today. Black, and everything sticks to it, and you can see everything on it. Okay, This bag has, I think, probably what it's called. Is it called a gusseted bottom? I don't know. Let me, just for the ease of showing you, you want to have a squared bottom, right? So in order to get this, what we need to do, over where you can see, we're going to cut out a 3-inch square from each corner on the bottom only. Okay, and I happen to have a little 4-inch ruler, so I'm going to line up the edges so that I have 1, 2, 3 inches, 1, 2, 3 inches. And I'm just going to take your standard ballpoint pen and I'm going to draw a line like that. And I'm going to do that again over on this side. Lining up, making sure that you know, if you didn't have this, okay, I'll use my Tim Holtz ruler and show you. If you don't have one of these, you would just take a regular ruler, make a mark here at 3 inches. You've got the 3-inch, whoops, hang on, that wasn't 3, that was 3 1/4. So you've got the 3-inch mark on the edge here. Make a mark, turn it around, do the same thing here, mark it this way, and then you're going to connect basically the two. Okay? And if you made a mistake like I did, don't worry about it. Chances are you're not going to wash this bag and it'll be fine. Okay, so once you have that done, you're going to take and you're going to cut those out. And check twice that you are on the bottom before you cut. Okay. Otherwise, your top just became your bottom. And I just throw that away. Okay, so we have that. Move these things out of the way. Okay, so your bag's gonna look something like this. A bite taken out of that corner, a bite taken out of that corner. In order to get the squared bottom, we're gonna take this and we're gonna open it up, open wide, and we're gonna match, we're gonna open these seams up, okay? Oh, you know what? I forgot. I'm going to take this over to the ironing board and I'm going to press this bottom seam open just like I did the side seams, okay? So I'll be right back. Okay, so we have our bottom seam pressed open. Now we're going to take and we're going to open that square up. And we're going to match up the side seam with the bottom seam. And we're going to pin. All right, and then you can put a pin in here. Maybe it would be better if I did it like this. Okay, I'll show you on the other side too. So your side seam and your bottom seam are open seam allowance. Okay, so we have it like this. We're going to take and gently open it up, matching the two edges. Open up our seams, match them together. And you want to be careful here because you cut that seam, you cut the stitching on that seam, and you don't want your seam to open up, so be very careful on that. And this seam we're going to stitch these together with a 1/4 inch seam. Okay? Whoops. Move my entire mat. All right. Oh, so sorry. Hazards of doing your own videoing. Okay, and you want to start at the very edge, and you do want to back stitch on this one, so you have a nice crisp corner. So I'm just going to start off stitching, and this one I'm going to do manually by pressing my button to back stitch, and I'm going to back stitch all the way off and then come back on. Hopefully you can see that. And we're just going to stitch all the way across. You want to make sure when you get to this the seam allowance that it's still flat. Both on the top and the bottom. And just take your time to go across there, because it's better to take your time than to have to take stitches out. Okay, we're coming to the edge again, at the corner. So we're going to back stitch all the way and come back and stitch off the fabric. Okay, and we'll clip that off. Clip that. So it's going to look like this. Okay, and you want to do the same on the other side. I'll be right back after I get that side done. Okay, we'll try to get as much of this in frame as possible. So this is what your bag is looking like right now. These are the side seams. This is what it looks like. Okay. Actually, we're going to go ahead and we're going to turn it right side out. So gently turning it right side out. And you're just taking and your fingers and working those corners out. So that you have crisp corners. See that? And we want to do the same thing on the other side. And you can just take and finger press this. And I'll do that on this side as well. You want to finger press that seam open, and you can just kind of roll it and work with it. Because that would kind of be a difficult seam to press open on the machine. Plus it's a 1/4 inch seam, so, or on the ironing board, and it's only a 1/4 inch seam, so that's okay. Okay, so we have, this is our bag so far, right? Now we're going to put the handles on. So what I want you to do is find your side seam. You need 2 pins, and we are going to put your ruler or your tape measure up against the seam, and we're going to measure over 1 inch, and we're going to stick a pin in there, and we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Put a pin 1 inch in. There you have it. You're going to do that on both sides. You're going to take your handle and you're going to line up one edge of the handle where you put the pin, and having the top of your bag even with the handle edge, and you're just going to take that and pin that in place. Okay, now you're going to take it the other end and do the same thing, lining up edge of your handle with where the pin is. Pull the pin out while holding the handle there, and you have that. You're going to repeat that on the other side. Okay? Once you've repeated that on the other side, what you're going to do is you're going to take, oh, I am so sorry, I keep bumping you. You're going to take your machine and you're just going to do about a 1/4 inch seam, a little bit less than a 1/4 inch seam, and stitch this down and stitch this down. Okay? And you will understand why. Make sure that your handle, can you, I don't know, can you get it cooked? Can you, yeah. You want to make sure that your handle is flat, I guess you would say. Get that back over here. I don't suppose it matters if it's coming out like that or going down like that, as long as the same side of the fabric is facing down on the bag. Okay, so we're going to baste this down. And the way I do it, I just, rather than stopping and starting, I just go ahead and continue all the way across to the next handle, making sure that my seam is lying flat underneath. Okay, and we get to the edge, and this is what it's going to look like. Okay, so do that on the other side, and I'll be back and we'll start work on the lining. Okay, so we have set the outer portion of our bag aside and we're going to work on the lining. So for the lining, what you want to do is you want to put it right sides together. The black is difficult to tell which the right sides are, but trust me when I say I have right sides together. You're going to pin down the 15.5 inch side. Okay, on both sides of the 15.5 inch side, and you're going to stitch your seams with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, on both of those. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll be back to talk about the bottom. Okay, so I have stitched my side seams on the 15.5 inch side. I've used a 5/8 inch seam allowance, and the reason for that, a 5/8 inch is 1/8 of an inch bigger than a 1/2 inch. You want your lining to be just slightly smaller than your bag so that it fits nicely in there, okay? So I have stitched both side seams. I have pressed the seams open, but we're going to close them back up for now. you're going to find the bottom of your bag. Now again, if you have directional fabric, you want to make sure that, you know, if you have some cute little kitty cat print, you want to make sure the kitty cats are facing the right way. So you want to be mindful of which end you choose to be your top and which end is your bottom. With a solid color or non-directional, it doesn't matter. Okay, so for the bottom of this bag, it's very similar to the bottom of the outside part of the bag, with one exception. Somewhere around the middle of the bag, we are going to mark off 3 inches so that we can turn the bag after we've stitched it. And I'm gonna see, can I see this one very well? I'm using dark fabric. If you're using dark fabric and you don't sew a lot, you might not have these supplies. I happen to have a really nice marking pencil. I'm going to mark a spot right here. But if you don't have that, chalk will work. So I'm going to mark right here with chalk. Okay, so here and here. Okay, what we're going to do, I'm also going to stick a pin in right there and one here, just as an extra reminder. We're going to stitch across here, all the way across the bottom, stopping here, securing, you know, do the back stitch to secure the stitches, skip over, start right here, secure the stitches, go all the way to the end, and you don't have to secure the stitches on the ends, because again, we're going to be cutting those corners out like we did on the outside of the bag. But you do want to make sure that you secure your stitches in the middle where you're leaving this open. Okay? I don't think you need to watch me stitch that on the machine. The other thing, you know, if you don't have anything to mark it with, just mark it with the pins. Okay, I'll be right back. Okay, so we have our bottom seam stitched from the edge to our mark, back stitched here, skip over, back stitch here, and stitch again all the way to the edge. Now we want to mark our 3-inch squares that we're going to cut out, and line that up nice. Draw your lines for your square and do the same on this side. I did test to see if you have dark fabric. You can do it with a lead pencil. It's a little bit more difficult to see, but you can see it. Okay, so we're going to go ahead just like we did before, and we're going to cut these out. And it doesn't have to be exactly on the line, but as close as you can get. Okay, I wanted to explain, maybe I should just take you over to the ironing board. Let's go to the ironing board. Okay, what I wanted to explain, and hopefully will be a helpful tip, is that if you have a seam that is difficult to get to, there's no way to really open this up and press it open. So what I do is, and this is going to be horrible for you to see on the black, you just lay it out flat, you fold one side of your seam open, okay, and press. Let me see if I can get, oh, that's worse. So sorry. Okay, and then you flip it over and you fold the other side of your seam flat toward you. If that makes sense. Hopefully it will. When I take it over to the to the sewing table, you will see what I mean a little bit better. Can you see that? How I've just folded it to one side, pressed it, folded it to the other side, pressed it. Okay, let's go back to the sewing table. Okay, hopefully that made sense. But if it was so dark over there, and I'm so sorry, let's just pretend that we haven't pressed this open. So what you would do is you would take and fold this side and press it. Okay, press it down and then flip it over and do the same. This would be like this. Pull it down, press it open, or press it down. Ah, sorry. It's getting late. Press it, and then hopefully you can see here. See how I've then pressed the seam open. Okay, so we are going to do the exact same thing with this one, with this corner that we did with the outer portion of the bag. I'm going to open that up. I'm going to match my two seams together. I'm going to pin them. And it takes sometimes it's a little fiddly. Okay, see? And see, we have our opening here, our 3-inch opening so that we can turn it. Okay, so again, you're going to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You're going to start off the edge of the fabric, all back stitch, all the way across, back stitch. Going to do that on both sides. I'll see you in a bit. Okay, so this is what the bottom of our lining looks like. We have the little opening here that we're going to use to turn. This is the top portion of the lining. And guys, we are getting close to the end. Okay, so at this point, we are going to take the outside of our bag and we're going to take the lining. If I can get it opened up here. And we are going to put right sides together. Okay, so the way to do that is just take the outside of your bag and slip it into your lining. And you want to take your time and get it down in there nice and straight. Can be a little bit fiddly, but it's well worth it in the end. What might be helpful, okay, so again, we have right sides together. The first thing you're going to match up the side seam on your bag to the side seam on your lining, okay, and you want to nest those seams together. And let's see if we can get a good shot here of this. Get those threads out of the way. So you can see here, let me see if I have something pointy that I can use. This is your the side seam of your bag. This is the side seam of your lining. You want to get those nice and straight together, okay? So once you have that lined up, then you want to line up the top edges. And before it slips, you want to stick a pin in there, or two. Okay, so you can trim off if your fabric is raveling. which that black tends to want to. Okay, can you see that? Get up that close. Okay, and then you want to do the same on the other side, and then the rest will just kind of work itself out. Again, we are fold your lining down so you can see the seam, line it up with the side seam of the bag, match the top edges together, and I like to pin the seam allowances together. Okay, and then you're just going to go around shake it down in there. You want to make sure that your handles are down so they don't get caught up, because what we're going to do is we're going to stitch all around the top edge. And this can be a little bit fiddly, but you want to take your time and match it up as best as possible.
And this is one area that I do like to use a lot of pins because you don't want it slipping on you. And then because when you start sewing and you get all the way around to the other corner and you still have fabric left, but on the top, but not on the bottom. Okay, again, just kind of like shake it down in there. Line up those top edges. Pin it down. You might have to ease a little bit in because remember your lining is just slightly smaller than your outer bag. And you might get around to the other side of pinning and you still have fabric left over on one side, either on the lining or the bag, and just readjust until you get it all evened out. But if you have stitched your seams, what's that word? Come on, do that words. Consistently, if you have done a consistent half-inch seam, if you've done a consistent 5/8 inch seam, then it should line up. So try to be, as consistent with your seam allowances as possible. Okay, and it may seem like I have a lot of pins in here, I do, but putting them in is a safeguard to the fabric not slipping as you're stitching.
Okay, so once you're happy with that, and I think I don't know, over here, let's adjust a few. See how that wants to stick up? I don't like that. Okay, so once you're happy, you're going to take it to the machine, and I think on this seam I did 1/4 of an inch. So I like to start at one of the side seams and go all the way around. That way, if you do have a little bit of excess fabric, it's going to be at the side seam and it's maybe not as noticeable there, but fingers crossed you won't. It will all line up perfectly and you'll get around there and be smooth sailing. So we're going to start here. We're going to stitch 1/4 of an inch in. We're going to go all the way around and back stitch at the beginning, back stitch at the end, and I will see you on the other side. Okay guys, we are almost finished. This is what your bag should be looking like right about now. You've stitched all the way around the top edge. All right, so if there are any stray threads hanging about, you want to clip those off, kind of like here. And the next step is to turn it right side out. So we're going to reach in. You could have left this a little bit bigger if you wanted, but I prefer to leave it on the small side. We're just gonna reach in here. We're gonna feel for the corner, and we're gonna very gently start pulling it through and working it through, because it's taken us a while to get to this point. We don't want to mess it up now. So just gently work the bag through.
And it's quite bulky because it has that fusible fleece in it. Let's keep going. See, we have a little ways to go there. Okay, I think I see a problem. What happened? I don't know. We'll check it out. We'll check it out when we get there. Yes, finally.
Okay, so you want to continue with your lining to get that all the way. Oh, so sorry. Okay, let me check to see before I go any further what I thought my problem was, that my handles weren't caught in, but that one is fine. Nope, looks good. Okay, so the outside of your bag, your lining, you just want to take and stuff your lining down into your bag. Shake it down in. Press the corners in. Smooth it out. Do the same thing on the other side. Just take an overall look at it. Now I wanted to show you something quickly. We have a couple of options, but I'm going to go with option number one. If you notice on this bag, I tucked the lining all the way in. On this one, I actually kind of made the lining bigger on purpose, because when I was making this one, I considered doing the same thing on this one that I did later on this one. How this is done is that you actually pull, you see here how your lining is still sticking out, and then you would stitch what I would consider in the ditch, in the seam, okay? That's what I did on this one. On this one, I tucked the lining all the way in and then did a top stitch here, okay? So what we want to do is just take, and this again is also fiddly, take your time and do it. Take it over to the ironing board, and you want to roll your lining to the inside. And it's easiest if you first kind of finger press it and do it. And you can even, as you finger press it, pin it a bit. So it's just fiddly. I don't know any other way to explain it. But the way the bag is meant to be made is with the lining completely on the inside. I just changed it up a little bit and put the lining, left the lining sticking up some, and used that as an accent to the bag. I hope that makes sense. So I'm going to continue this all the way around. Lift the handles up and put the lining down. Then what you want to do after you finish that, after you get to that point, okay, you want to take it and press it. Have a nice crisp edge on it. and it looks all wrinkly because it's been wadded up when we were turning it right side out. So you want to go ahead and press this again as well. If you've made any little finished pillows or pin keeps, you know the same thing happens with those. You spend all your time stitching them, and then when you are doing a fully finished item, you've pressed it after you stitched it and it looks all nice, and then you're working on your fully finished item and it gets all wrinkly again. So do you see just how I am working this around and working that lining to the inside? And just for added measures, you don't have to pin it. I just find that it helps to hold it in there a little bit better while you're pressing. Okay, so I'm going to go press mine down and I'll come back and I'll show you how I top stitch it, and it just gives a nice finished look to it. But it's, to give you an idea, it looks something like this. Your lining is to the inside. It just makes the item look a bit more professional, a bit more finished. So I'm going to go to the ironing board. I will see you back here in a little bit. Okay, so here we are. I have pressed the top of the bag so that the lining is fully inside of the bag. And now I'm going to take and start stitching. And I think, I'm going to remove this just maybe to make it a little bit easier. I always start on one of the seams, and I'm going to stitch, I think I'm gonna do a 1/4 inch top stitch. Okay, see if I can, and because there are so many pins in this, it's gonna kind of go slow, but again, it's well worth the effort. Let me put my needle down. It's well worth the effort to take your time and do it right the first time. Found a stray thread. And that way you don't have to redo anything. Okay, so I just wanted to show you part of me stitching the top. And it, especially at the seams, it gets quite thick, so you want to take your time in that area because you have so many layers of fabric, and then you have the fusible fleece in your seams. So you just work your way around. Okay, so we're coming back around. Let's hope our bobbin thread lasts this last little bit. Okay, I see my beginning threads here. I'm going to pull those out of the way. Keeping everything underneath nice and flat. Pull that last pin out. And we go back to the beginning. We're going to reverse just a couple of stitches. And there we have it. And we only have one more thing to do, guys, and then we are done. I don't even want to think about how long this video is going to be. I will apologize in advance if it's really super long. Okay, so there we have the top stitching. What you want to do is you want to go ahead and take it to the ironing board and press it all again. But before we do that, we have one final thing, one final step, and that is to close up the hole in the lining. So you want to pull your lining back out, and you can hand stitch this if you want, but I'm lazy. I want to save my hand stitching for cross stitching. So I'm just going to take and pin. I usually put a pin at one end and another one at the beginning. And so you've closed it together, and you're just going to take and stitch right as close to the edge as possible, like with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, so you want to pull it all the way out from your bag so you don't catch anything else into that seam. I'm going to pull that pin out. I know where to start. I'm going to do my needle down, and I'm going to set my thread. And I'm just going to stitch all the way across till I get to the end of the opening. Just about right there. I'm going to back stitch to set the stitch. Needle up. Trim that thread off. Trim the beginning threads off. It's hard to see on this black. Okay, turn the machine off because we are finished with that. And then we're going to tuck our lining back in. And there we have it. I'll be right back. I'm going to switch up, I'm going to reset the camera, and I'll be right back. Okay, so hopefully you all have made it to this point in the video, and if you have, thank you for sticking it out with me. I know it was a long process, but I wanted to be as thorough as I could possibly be. And just a recap, I want to thank Hearts and Bees for their wonderful tutorial to make this fabric basket. And this again was the original size that is in her written tutorial. And as some of you may remember, this is the original larger one that I showed in my videos. And the one we completed today is this one. And I think it turned out pretty nice. One thing that I might add, actually to all of them, I'm going to measure the bottom and cut either mat board or chipboard and cover it with the same fabric that's in the lining using something like Aileen's spray adhesive, and put that down in the bottom, and possibly that would make the bag a little more sturdier. Words, who's at words? But I mean, that is just an option depending on what you're using the bag for. But I think I might like to have a bit of more stability in my bags. Anyway, that's it for this video. Again, thank you all for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them below, and I will do my best to answer them. I am in no way a sewing expert. I'm not an expert in anything, but I just hopefully can help you out if you do have questions. So thanks again, and I hope you have a wonderful stitchy week wherever you are, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye for now.